good? Okay, I'll take this as well. So my name is Phil. Last name is McGinnis. I just thought you could probably read it better if I just put my first name here. And so I am happy to be with you all. Thanks for coming out. I know there was some traffic and weather, but it's great to have people together. Thank you to Katya. She's in the back here. She's going to be also interviewing our guest, Amber. Thank you also for being here. Igor's running the tech over there. And then Steven here at the front, he's been running the local VR meetup group for years, and so he may have invited several of you as well, so thank you to him. So pretty much between those people that I just pointed out, we wanted to bring you all together to talk about VR. I've been in the Charlotte area my entire life, and so I'm not sure about all of you, but I'm a big fan of Charlotte. I know it's changed a lot. My goal is to have Charlotte have a presence in the startup community and really support entrepreneurs and startups and cutting edge innovation, that kind of thing. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to get involved with the organization of the VR/AR Association. And so we started the chapter at a very inopportune time in 2020. And so we really didn't have any in-person events, even though we had intended to. And so here we are. This is great to be together. We're like taking our baby steps back towards the plans that we had 2 years ago. The goal is to make you all connected and engaged and networking and things like that. So we'll have events regularly. You'll hear about them announced through social media and through the Meetup page that Steven has. We'll just integrate the entire community of interested hobbyists and developers. And then the big thing that we want to do, which may or may not be present here, is get businesses involved as well. And so if any of you have those businesses in your network that need to hear about these solutions that they would pay to integrate, I know it's taking a while to get that conversation going. And it seems like in the past year, VR went from being kind of like an unknown technology to being like a ridiculed technology, I think, and that's kind of like not what you really wanted. You didn't want it to go from no one cares to a lot of people are making jokes about it. But that's just what happens when I think Facebook makes that kind of announcement about, changing their name and then doing all the videos they've done. And Facebook has such a huge profile, like in the media anyway. So we're trying to really establish what VR can do for business uses, make it to where you're seeing it more in education and industry training, collaborative meetings, that kind of thing. And so having those discussions, that is what Amber specializes in at her company, Lobaki, which is based in Mississippi. And so her and I have connections to the Charlotte area. She was in the startup community around here in business leadership as well before she went out there in that leadership role in Mississippi. And then Katya, like I mentioned, she's going to be speaking with Amber here during their talk and then taking questions and things like that afterwards. Katya and I know each other from my title as leader of this VR/AR Association Charlotte chapter. She reached out, we started talking. She's very plugged into the Charlotte innovation community and businesses and networking that happens already here. And so she helped put together the plan for this event and the venue. So I will welcome her up to kick it off. Did I miss anything in the intro? And then Amber as well. And they can get started. And then I'll cool.
Okay, that's still yours. So the first thing I need to mention, these mics, they are not for sound, they're just for recording. So don't get confused, we will be talking. It's not gonna get louder, but it is what it is. Technology is going on. Thank you all for coming. I'm so happy to see you all here, even though the weather wasn't so good, but I'm happy that you came. And so today I'm also very excited to see Amber with me. And especially excited I am because she's a woman in tech, she's a successful entrepreneur, and that's not that usual. Like, even in this room, we only have one woman additionally, and that's it. Yeah. So I wanted to have this talk in a very warm manner, and essentially it's all about Amber sharing her story. And we will have Q&A after, so please be ready with your questions, and we will be ready to answer them. So let's start. Yeah. Amber, welcome, and thank you so much for coming. And let's start with your story. Could you please share how you started? Were you a technologist at the beginning? Where did your career path start, and how you came to this point?
Fun stories, story time. So yes, I am the least technical person ever. to be in VR. So I will start with that. I came out of college with a master's in education. I thought that's what I was going to do. I was going to teach and change the world by being a teacher, and I taught in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools. I taught 6th grade math, and my average class size was 38 students. And yeah, I realized I'm not going to make a difference in this situation and how this is set up. And you know, I had this whole, you know, vision. This is what I'm going to do. And so I got out. I got out of education, which was hard. You know, you go to school and I had a master's and had really dedicated myself to that and knew that something had to change. So a wise decision at that time in like 2009, got in the mortgage industry. Because that made sense, right? You all got it then, right? You put it together. I saw the light bulbs go off. But it was actually a great time to get in the mortgage industry with a startup, because there was nothing bad on the books. It was a clean slate, and that's where I got my itch for entrepreneurship and the startup world, and became crazy. Because I think you have to be a little bit insane to do a startup. And so I was with this company that is now, I was there for about 10 years. We were in 2 states and had about 50 employees when I started. When I left, we were at 4,500 employees and in all 50 states. And I was, you know, I learned the business from the ground up. I knew nothing at the time, and just learned. Went back and got my MBA during that time, because I didn't understand business, because I was going to be a teacher. So I just fell in love with the startup world, and I kind of reached this point where I needed my next challenge. I had this amazing job. I was, you know, traveling the country, setting up our offices and processes and procedures. A wonderful, wonderful job that I made. You don't leave those jobs, but I did, because again, I was a little crazy. And there was actually Phil saw a story about this guy in the Mississippi Delta who was doing VR, and this was 2018. And he made the trek to Mississippi and met with this guy. His name's Vince Jordan, and talked to him. And on his way back, he's like, "You want a new challenge? You need to talk to this guy." And he had started the company, Lobaki, and they were getting ready to really start growing. And that's what I had done. And I was like, okay, let's see what this is. So 3 weeks later, I was working with Lobaki. I came on as their COO, and we started building. we have a hungry little monster.
She's taking care of herself.
Yes, she's very self-sufficient. So we started building the company, and our focus at the time, you know, how many of you are familiar with VR in 2018 and where it stood at that time?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, it was about like that response. It was this thing that everybody wanted to be real and wanted, you know, to grow, but it just didn't have the momentum yet. And at that time, there were only headsets that could be plugged into computers to work. There was nothing that was non-tethered. So when you're talking to people about investing in VR at that time, just for the hardware, you were talking about $3,000-$4,000, and that was a huge thing and something that was very not proven. And so yeah, that's the industry I went into in 2018. So I started working there, and we really started out in schools, which really was one of the things that I was drawn to with the vision of the company to start with, was how this technology and business was going to integrate in education, which were my passions, and such a unique opportunity. And I really saw this technology as the way to make the impact that I could not in that room with 38 students. And until a systematic change happens, this is what I saw as a way to make the bigger impact. And so we started growing, and we started putting VR into schools across Mississippi and into other states as well. And in 2020, July of 2020, great timing, they said, hey, take over the company. It's like, you all are really, really funny. It just gets better. So it could either be to say, we're going to give it to you as a woman, and this is something that I've read a lot about. This was happening a lot during the pandemic. Companies were transitioning over to women leading them, almost as a it's either going to win or not on your shoulders. And it was happening. No pressure. It was happening a lot at the time. And we're almost 2 years from there. And from then to now, we now have 24 employees in Jackson, Mississippi. I don't know if you know much about Jackson. It's not a place where people really want to go to work, and it's not the tech hub of the country. But that's really what's super unique is the open lane that is there. And we've just been able to really start to dive in and see the possibilities of this technology in schools, but now expanding into industries as well. So that's a very long history.
But I think it's an amazing, how you changed and what the opportunities came up along the way, and you kind of got them. And even though there is so much pressure on leading this company through pandemic, which could end up very differently, but it is where it is, and I'm so happy for you. I wanted to get back a little bit to the time where you just started introducing VR to Jackson, Mississippi schools.
Yeah.
So if you could share a little bit about that journey, because schools in general are not very perceptive to the new technology. So how did that go? How do you start? I will tell you, the thing that has been the most successful for us are individuals, like the people in this room, honestly. People who get it and who champion the idea and who want to bring it in, because it's so new. Coming from education, I understand teachers and some of their challenges. They get thrown so much stuff all the time. Yeah. You got to teach this now. You have less time, you have more students. Oh, here's this new technology you have to do. They just keep getting things added to them, and so what are we going to do? Oh, here's VR. Here's another thing you need to learn. And so what we've really done is have found champions, but also in looking at our product and what we're doing, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for teachers to integrate. And the truth is, the students love it. You're speaking their language, and it's so easy. And if we can get the teachers to see that, and I always say this, it's a tool for your toolbox. I'm not trying to take your job. I'm actually trying to make your job easier. And that's the approach that we've taken from how we develop our products to how we integrate them into the schools, because teachers have such a hard job, and it's not getting any easier. But if I see where this is going, I see a lot of change, and where it will go. But the reception has been oddly positive with those two things in mind, those champions that really get behind it and making something that is a tool and that really is making teachers more effective. And as time has gone on, we're able to show that more and more. So the conversations start to get a little bit easier. Any school I talk to, it's the same initial objections. How is this going to be better? Yeah.
How? Why? And we were just talking about this, that one word, presence. Presence is the key to VR. All the power, all the good stuff comes from that one thing. And if we can get our students engaged and in the presence of what they're learning, it completely changes what they can learn and how they learn and how they retain it. There was a study last year that PricewaterhouseCoopers came out with, which I love because it was somebody not in VR that came out with VR stats. So it's not very self-promoting. But that versus traditional learning, any kind of learning, whether it's education or training, students and adults are learning 4 times faster in VR and retaining up to 4 times the amount of information. Okay, that's an amazing statistic. If I handed that to you as a teacher,
the impact.
Right? How and what are they judged on? They're judged on their test scores. Unfortunately, it's the truth. Can that help them? If your students are learning faster and retaining more, I think that probably helps. So being able to add in those pieces as we're building this whole idea of this ecosystem of digital immersive education, things like that really help.
Yeah, I could easily see this. So you showed this impact in schools, and then you decided to impact into different industries. So did you work specifically with companies? How did that part went? Could you share?
A startup always evolves, and especially in an emerging market, in an emerging industry, you don't know where it's going to go. So in 2018, schools were decently receptive to this idea as opposed to businesses. And in 2019, when Oculus came out with the first Quest headset that was non-tethered, it opened up a whole new world. And we saw that opportunity. The price point came down. You went from $3,000 or $4,000 to get into VR to $400. It's a huge difference. Yeah. That's just on the hardware, right? And so your conversation then can just be completely different. And that was one of the, if I look at the history of VR, that is a major turning point in the industry so far. So seeing that, we saw, okay, we're starting to see how this is working in education. Now let's start to see if we can have these conversations where we take the word learning, and it's really the same thing, but when you apply it to adults, we call it training.
Yeah.
Which really should be called development. My board, the chairman of my board says we train dogs and we develop people, so we really should call it workforce development as opposed to training, which is true. But it's the same thing. So the concepts that we're using in education and developing that, let's see what that looks like from an industry standpoint, because it's the same concepts. And again, we had a really great relationship with someone who took us into Continental Tire, was our first industry partner. And, again, we had a champion. We had somebody that saw the vision and really saw it at a very, very early time, and really embraced the idea of what VR could do. And when you have that with a name like Continental Tire, it's very helpful to take that to the next person you talk to and say, hey, we just did this great project with Continental Tire. I'm sure you've heard of them, right? So it's very helpful. But the conversations are still difficult. We're talking, 3 years from there. They're not adopting it as fast as you would think.
Yeah.
Even though we've had these breakthrough moments. Obviously the pandemic slowed some of that, but there were more opportunities. Some opportunities stopped and others opened up because of the pandemic for us. But we're seeing it's not as fast as we thought it would be, but the conversations are happening more often, which So from looking at an industry perspective, I think that's positive for all of us who love VR and want to see this adopted in more ways. I can tell you, I average 3 meetings a week. 3 meetings a day. 3 meetings a day with either a school or an industry partner. And that's just me, and I have 2 other salespeople on my team. So the conversations are happening, which I think is very encouraging. And I think we're getting ready to see a lot of movement from both sides, from industry and education.
Yeah. I feel like there were a lot of early adopters, and so they kind of got into various industries. Like we can see people doing this in healthcare, in education. We can see people doing it in manufacturing with heavy machinery. Now there was this article about soft skills training, because that's what a lot of people lost. Like they forgot how to talk to other people, how to manage the audience, and it became scary during 2 years. But obviously, when you have all these conversations, there are some industries and some companies that can adopt it pretty quickly and get the impact, but maybe there are others that are not so acceptive. And could you share which industries and which solutions you think are like getting faster, better, and other cases where you not advising to use AR/VR at this point, at least?
Yeah, I think there was another study I saw, and I would say anecdotally what I've seen kind of matches this, that in 2021, the industries that adopted VR the most were healthcare, then education, then workforce training. And I know workforce training is very general, but there was a lot of, CTE kind of discussion. But that is exactly what I would say from my anecdotes as well, and what I've seen. Medical is taking off in VR, and I'm so excited to see that. It's I think going to be very transformative, and oddly enough, I believe that it's taking off in both AR and VR. Most industries have not really adopted into AR very well, except the huge names, the Boeings, they're using for design, Audi, some of these car companies using a lot for design, and things like that on the AR side. Again, I think the hardware is one of those obstacles there, and the cost, we're still at $3,500 a headset. You're going to have a lot. You're going to have that same thing in 2018 with VR, and the applications are very different. I see VR much more on the training, repetition, kind of what you want to learn, and AR in the live application, and the projection of digital imagery into what you're doing right now. And so 2 very different applications, both very useful. So those industries, I would agree with that, that study. I would say that manufacturing's harder than you would think. And I had a conversation just this last week. I won't name the company. I will say it is a very major car company that you all know, okay? You all know. And it's the guy who's in charge of their maintenance team for their line. He's not that much older than me, and he says, I'm just a good old boy. I don't believe in all this stuff. Whatever. Conversation changed by the end, but that's where he started. But one of the interesting things he did say, and he's the first one to say it, but I think that it's true, but he said it. All my guys that I manage, they're 50, 60 years old. They're not going to do this. They're not going to put this headset on. They think it's a game. Doesn't matter if it's better or not. That's their perception of it. Now, his new problem, though, is those guys are getting ready to leave.
Oh, yeah.
And these new people are coming in, and let's just say they have a different set of challenges. Some of those soft skill challenges that you're talking about. But the question then turned, well, how do you get this new generation not only trained, but even interested in working here?
Oh, yeah.
How do you even get them to want to do this, let alone training them, right?
Yeah, something outside YouTube or influencer world. Like
That's
yeah.
all they know, right?
Yeah.
That's where our conversation completely changed to, what if I could expose them completely to what this job is? I can have them be on the floor. I can have you walk them around and give them a tour of this facility. They can hear what it's like to be here. They can see the machines. You can show them how awesome it is to work here and their career path. And they can not just see it in a video, but they experience it because of that sense of presence that we can give in VR. And totally changed his perception. We went from my old guys, this is a game, this will never work, to there's a real problem in workforce development. Not only the training of the people who are there or retraining or anything like that, how do we even get people into these jobs? And I see that as some of the most up and coming uses, and we're doing this a lot in the industries that are not very receptive to adopting VR. This way of thinking of exposing and generating your workforce, it's a completely different conversation point. And for us, we think that kind of dips their toes in the water. They see then what it does and how great it is. They're going to adopt this for their training and things like that. That'll get them into it, and that's what we've started to see. So those industries that are really not getting it for what we think they should, like we know how great this is for training. You can feel like you cut off your finger, but you don't, You can get electrocuted, but not. We know that, and you can tell them that, yeah, that'd be great. They're just not there yet, but they're close. And if we can get them to use VR in some way to expose them to it and solve a problem that they have, they're really going to start to understand the greater power and where they can integrate it in multiple different places.
Yeah, I think it taps also a lot into constant training and upward mobility and safety protocols, because they do train every single time. And I just had a conversation, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, with the company who services the printing, like manufacturing printers. And so they had this experiment. They got an engineer, and he did the service for the printer, and they got a marketing intern who have seen this printer for the first time. And she used AR glasses and serviced another printer. And then engineer came and checked, and he told, like, this was one of the best services, the thoroughest one. And you can see this video going on, like which things to unscrew, where to put where, and it went extremely good. So this is something that we are looking at for those industries, and the minute they understand it, I think it's going to be accepted way more and way better. So
and it's those little things. It's finding their one place, I think, is really key. Every industry has their one thing, or every company even, this one thing that's kind of nagging that they need to solve a problem. And AR and VR really have the ability to be a tool to solve a lot of those problems, and it's just figuring out what that is and how that can work. And I think once they see that, like you said, that adoption and understanding will happen. We all love it, and that's why we're here, and we feel like, why is everybody not just shouting from the rooftops, this is the greatest thing? It just takes a lot more time, a lot more proof, especially in industry. It's amazing to me, because we see how much money they throw around on things, but it's amazing to me how tight those budgets can get. When ROI, that's all they want to know. And when you're talking about an emerging industry, ROI is sometimes difficult to directly relate back to. And that's what these managers who are making these decisions are judged on. And it's that fear of failure. If I make this decision to integrate this and I spend this money, what does that look like on me? We need the people who say, if I do this and it fails, I'm going to say we tried it and try and figure out why it didn't work. Was it what we did? Was it who we worked with? Was it, what was the problem? Instead of being afraid of that failure and, I'll lose my job or what, being able to stand up behind their decisions and be the innovators. That's what it's going to really take to continue to push it forward. And they're there. There's just
need to find them.
You gotta find them.
Yeah, there's this group of enthusiasts who want to
Yes.
take courage and do whatever it takes to kind of bring the technology. We're talking a lot about the way companies accept this technology, but I wanted to talk about how you create it. Because obviously if you come to the facility, there is a development side, there is the marketing side, and then there is also the specialist. How do you know? You just get the view of this heavy machinery. Could you share a little bit about the process, how you work with the facilities to create the simulations?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I say we, remember I'm not the technology person here, but we at Lobaki, we always say we are the technology experts and you are the subject matter experts. So whoever we're working with, I'm not going to pretend like I know what machine does.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to make an experience for you based on what I think that machine does. So, our process is to sit down and our lead developer sits down with the subject matter expert from the company. We even do this with educators, so it doesn't matter which way it is. We sit across from them and we storyboard. And the most important thing for us in this process is we start at the end. What is the end goal that you want to achieve with this? And that determines how we develop it. It determines what headset we would recommend you to use. It is everything. Some people think they need all kinds of CGI and all this stuff. Well, if what you're trying to get out of this at the end is just an identification, is that the best use of CGI in your budget? I can do a lot of 360 video and identification and things like that in VR and help you keep your budget down and give you the impact that you want, right? So that's the first step, is really figuring out what the end goal is. And from there, we build out a storyboard. And that allows our developer to go back and say, this is everything we're going to need to build. That builds the timeline, that builds the budget. And then we get into development. We, again, because we're not the experts of whatever the subject is, we do reviews every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the size of the project, with our partners. So they get to see it along the way. And so, in 3 months, we don't just hand you something and say, this is what I think you wanted, right? And hope that we're right. Because we want you to it's your product at the end of the day, so we want you to be very happy with it. So you're involved every single step of the way. And so our development team, when we make that storyboard and that list of who does what, the way we run our development team is everyone kind of has a specialty. And we only have kind of 2 people who I would say can kind of do everything in VR. So there's all kinds of different roles. So we have a landscape designer, a lighter, an animator, a modeler. We actually are bringing on a full-time concept artist who draws. She has an art degree. But that's a wonderful story. I can tell it another time, of bringing people into this industry that are like me, not technologists, but have found a way in a high-tech field. And that's a whole nother passion of mine that we might have to save for another
That's
day.
the educator side coming in,
It
teaching
is.
people and getting
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
I never thought this is what I would do, but here I am. And I think if you talk to at least half of my team, they would say the exact same thing. They never thought this was a possibility or that they would be in a tech field at all, especially in rural Mississippi.
Yeah.
And so, especially there.
Yeah.
So everybody kind of has their specialty. And so it's a bit like a conveyor belt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody does their part and it moves along. You will not believe this. In 24 people have one full-time coder.
Oh, wow.
So much of VR development and in the way that we do it is artistic. And luckily, you know, the two engines we use, Unity and Unreal, they have so much visual programming where it does a lot of it in the background. So this is pretty good for somebody who's not techie, right? I do know this part. It does so much in the background. So people that don't coding, what I've learned is a very specific way of thinking. And you can think that way or you can't. And we're trying to make a lot of coders who aren't going to be able to be coders. But the beautiful thing about VR design is that there's so much you can do without having to have that skill set and that side of your brain. And that's just been really awesome for me to see, developing this young talent and bringing them into this field where, you know, they're not coders. So the coders obviously kind of pull it all together. But on the other side of that, our sales team and our marketing team, they're I mean, like I said, I have 3 meetings a day on average. One Monday last month had 6 meetings in one day. I mean, and that's just me. And they're having the same, you know, they're having these same conversations and these same meetings. And so it's just a lot of talking. It's a lot of talking in this process. And what we've found on the sales side, if you can't just talk about it, you've got to put them in a headset. There's no way to explain it unless you've experienced it. And so, you know, you get into a meeting, in 5 minutes, you got to be in a headset or I'm wasting my breath. You're all like, yes, get it. Yeah. Because people are like, yeah, that sounds cool. Or, yeah, I'm telling people like, oh, this is so amazing. And you can do that. You can electrocute somebody and they'll feel it, but they're not hurt. And they're like, sure, if you say so. And then you make them have that experience. They're like, oh my goodness. And then,
really works.
then their brains start going. And so we've that's why meetings are so important in this process. And I think if you talk to anybody who does what we do, they would say the same thing. So you've got the dev side, you've got our sales side, and then we're just looking at the industry as a whole and what's coming and trying to guess as best as we can. And I think that's a big part of my job, is to kind of see the vision of what we think is coming. And I think we're so close to a lot of adoption. I think we're really, really close. You know, I use the roller coaster metaphor. I feel like we're just like right at that top, you know, where you're right at the hang time, right before you drop, and you're like, oh, it feels like we're right there. And I hope that's right. But I think there's going to be a ton of changes. There's going to be a ton. What we see as VR and AR right now is this conversation to be very different in 2 years. It's going to be very fast once this roller coaster does this, and it's going to do this. But once that first drop happens, we're going to be talking about different headsets, different companies, different integrations, different platforms, different uses. And I think that will happen fast. Don't know what it's all going to look like, but
it's exciting. We'll see, like, in a couple of years. Like, no one knew that this is coming. Like, I remember this feeling when I first got to VR Association, this meeting. And so they're showing AR glasses and how they're servicing like this remote facilities. And there is one guy coming and another one directing him. And they're like, this technology is 5-year-old. And I'm like, where were I this 5 years? Like, I didn't even know that this exists already. They adopted it. They're like expanding it and doing this whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's like 5 years from now. And so in the coming 3 or 5 years, it's going to expand. We are looking at Apple, Amazon creating their headsets.
Google,
So
I saw this week.
Google again. So yeah, I think it's gonna be booming. So let's get back. I really wanted to to ask you about this simulation that we actually put on our event event page about building bridges.
Yeah.
So I think this is the most exciting one. Like, I was looking through the simulation and I was like quite calm, and then I saw like, oh, it falls. Like, you can actually build and it's gonna fall and destroy the bridge. So that's what got me so much excited.
Yeah. So STEM is a big word in education, and we have a couple of really great partners who have a lot of STEM content, not in VR. And so we started looking through this content with them and saying, what would be some really amazing things to put these things together, STEM and VR. And one of the greatest things we came up with, the use of physics. So because the physics simulators have gotten really, really powerful and awesome in Unity and Unreal maybe a little bit better. Maybe a personal opinion there. But we just wanted to play with this idea of using this physics-based engine to create something for STEM and the parts that come together. So I remember when I was in class, we did the balsa wood kind of stuff, how much, you had balsa wood and you had to build stuff, and how much weight could it stand, or how tall could you build something. And so it's that same idea, but using technology. And so we were lucky to have an intern last summer who had he was double majoring as a software engineer and physics. It's like, you are a dream. And almost single-handedly put this together with us. And you get a budget, and you get a bunch of materials, and you got to build a bridge that works and makes this car get from point A to point B. And I've only gotten past level 1, just so you know. Again, I should not be an engineer. Not my forte. But it's really interesting to see, we just came out with this officially I think we actually just launched it this week officially. We've been kind of tweaking it a bit. But just being able to, we've kind of beta tested it, and kids, oh my goodness, they think it's just so fun. Again, we're speaking in their language because we're using the technology, but just being able to, they love to see if it works, but they really love when they actually crash the car, because it falls. Yeah. You turn the physics on, you build it, you have your materials, you build it. But then when you hit play, the physics turn on and the car starts to drive, and it either goes, it doesn't, or it'll go kind of wonky. But you see, you see how, if you were in your budget and what works. But then taking that idea, it's so powerful to see that and how that translates also into industry. That whole idea of physics and the importance of that in creating these simulations, whether it's for training or we are actually working with some DoD contractors as well. Those simulations and these physics pieces that we're able to use these engines for are, let me just say, they're creating some amazing things that are keeping us all safe, which is awesome to see. And it's only going to be more and more, but it's all from this idea of this physics-based engine. And so I'm super grateful there's smart people that can do that and
Yeah.
create that part for us to put into use. And I hope, so Phil, who introduced us, he's trying to get the headsets all loaded. So if you want to try the Bridge Builder, we have it. Hopefully we can we can get it working.
And we'll keep the score whoever gets past
the
the
best
level 2.
Well,
We
you'll
will
beat
celebrate.
me.
So,
You'll beat me for sure. I'm the worst.
yeah, I haven't tried it, but it looks so exciting, and I
Yeah.
feel like it drives interest because kids are so distracted. Their attention level going down, and actually adults are affected too. Like through the pandemic, so VR is probably the solution that will actually keep us going through learning
Yeah.
and all of these things. Yeah.
I think so. And I think just to add to that, and it just what we've seen through the pandemic, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but the soft skills, you know, we're working on a lot of things right now where we're bringing AI into VR. And when I say AI, I mean decision tree modeling, okay? The realistic talk of AI.
Yeah.
It's amazing what we're able to do and recreate conversations. And we're doing that from a training side with adults and bringing that also into education at a very young level for literacy as well. And I'm just super excited. I hope to, you know, update y'all in about 6 months on some amazing stuff that we're working on with integrating these other technologies as well with VR. And I think that's where the future is. It's not going to be insulated. You know, it's not going to be just VR or just blockchain or just, you know, this whole Web3 universe. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's all going to come together, and it's got a lot of power when you integrate them together. And so we're just on the cusp of doing some of that, but I'm super excited to see how these pieces come together, because it's going to take it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, that's amazing. So this is the part where we talk about future.
Yeah.
So let's dream a little bit. I know you have all this plans, like all this development that you're working on now. But what's next? What's next for Lobaki? Where are you going? What is the next goal? If you could share it, of course.
Goodness. Yeah. So the past 4 months, I would say I have had more strategy discussions than I've had in 2 years.
Okay, so you're ready for this question. That's good.
This is always a question. I think for me, the one thing I would say, you know, just from leading any company, especially a technology company, you got to fail fast, you got to fail forward. And so I can talk strategy and think I know what I'm doing today. I need to know that I can change tomorrow, and that's what it's going to be. And I think that that's any successful tech company, that's what you have to do, especially because the rate of innovation. So you talk about the future, and we're talking about all these different technologies and how they integrate. That's one of the things that I'm looking at very, very carefully, and looking at, you know, how people are doing this, blockchain and how you integrate that, but the safety behind all of these things as well. We are really looking at these integrations. I would say we have 2 areas that we are really focusing on. One is literacy, that I was saying, so on my K-12 kind of world, which will really go outside of K-12. We're talking about English as a second language as well, dyslexia, and so we've got a really amazing plan for that, and as well as workforce development. It sounds very broad, but it is a major issue right now in our country. You know, I talked to, like I told you, this very large manufacturing car company. They can't hire enough people. It doesn't, and it's not just one company. It's every single company that I talk to. The community colleges have wonderful programs. I see them getting ready to have a huge resurgence. That's my prediction. they're poised for some great things. So if you want to bet, I would put money on that one. But I think the integration of this technology with the community colleges can really be incredibly impactful in our workforce challenges that we have right now. So I'm looking at where we are, what we need, and where our technology can be in that. That's a big part of what I've been doing, and we've got to keep looking at that. And I got to look 6 months ahead. I got to look 12 months ahead and 2 years ahead. Right now, we're probably in that 12-month look with products and what we're looking at and what that's going to be. I think the future of education, I hope there's a big change in the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's going to take some bold thoughts. Yeah. But it's needed. I mean, we're seeing a huge, especially in North Carolina, the emergence of charter schools, huge. They have to turn more down than they can approve every year right now. It's a huge thing. And it's because, people want a different choice. And I think one thing that I can see, I'm sure y'all know, just the idea of not going to a school to go to school. We just ourselves have 4 schools that do that in partnership with us. Students are at home, teachers are at home, they get in their headsets and they go to school. And I think this idea of the Ready Player One kind of world is not far. And I think teachers are going to be not just teaching, they're going to be giving education in a digital format that I hope is more VR centered. I believe it's coming. There's a charter school group in Florida. They're all VR. It's across the state. And so I'm seeing that happen. If that's happening, I know what's coming, right? If they can do this, they're not building buildings. They're spending $5-6 million on building VR experiences that go a lot further than a $50-60 million building. When you start to see the economics behind it and the impact on the students, I think we're going to see a lot of this change, where you have one teacher that can administer education. They're going to administer it differently, right? They're not going to be standing in front of a classroom the same way. I think that's the future. Now, timeline, I don't know. That's a hard one on that one. It's a hard one.
It is, yeah.
But I definitely see it coming. I know that's a bold thing to say, and some of it is probably a dream. But I'm involved in some of it, so I can say that it's a possibility, and people are adopting some bold changes, and so I'm very hopeful for that in education, especially. I think so much will change as the hardware changes, and so that's really hard for us until we know kind of the ability of some of that hardware as to what it's exactly going to be. But again, in 6 months from now, after Apple's put out their headset, I think there's going to be a lot of shifts in this whole conversation. They're waiting for a reason. They're going to come out, and it's going to be something. I think it's going to have an impact. That's kind of how they do things. Now, hopefully I'm right about that one. But I think it'll change the industry a lot. So I know that's not all the predictions, but some of them.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one, and especially learning more about the successful schools who have already adopted the technology, and they will have the results by the time other schools will just think about it.
Yeah.
Like maybe getting one headset.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this has all been very interesting. I wanted to open up the room for questions. So if you're ready with some questions, and I'll pass the mic. You will have the mic.
I got one. I don't need a mic.
We need this for recording, so I'm gonna.
Oh, to record.
Yeah.
You have to look fancy. This is
Oh, you
very
already
official.
know. I'm all for it. You said VR, AR is at the cusp of adoption. What do you think is going to take for it? Is it just Apple releasing theirs, or is it something else that's really going to push it to this massive adoption that you were talking about?
It's a really, really great question. Facebook changing their name to Meta is good and bad, okay? I think it's helping in the adoption. So I think large corporations and their adoption and their entrance into the industry obviously going to help. Apple, I mean, you have Apple loyalists, right? If Apple puts it out, they're going to get it, right? It's just how it is. And I think that's going to be another group that hasn't been into it. If you look at emerging technologies in the history, the first adoption cycle is through entertainment. So look at the internet, that's what happened first. Even in cell phones, it's crazy, but it actually was that first. And I think that's what we're seeing with VR. And so as more people have headsets in their homes as well, I think it's going to help the adoption. I will tell you, so the Meta Oculus app was the #1 downloaded app on Christmas Day. That means a lot of people got headsets, and they are just opening their first actual store for retail. So all of this has been done through the internet so far, really. So when you're going to have physical locations, you're going to have more stuff in people's homes. They're going to adopt it from entertainment. Then what happens? So now my conversations with people, I'm not just introducing VR. They already know VR. Now we're talking about what you can do with it. Because prior to all of this, I'm having to teach you about VR first and why it's great and why you should want it. Then I can tell you what I can help you with it, right? So if I can get over that curve first, and because your kid has a headset at home and you're kind of used to that and you know a bit about it, you're already more open. And I think those things are really, really going to help the adoption. I'm seeing some of that since Christmas. Honestly, oh yeah, I got one of those for my kids. Completely different conversation than 6 months before that. Yeah, I don't know what it is. 6 months before that, we were having the conversations, what is AR? What is VR? What is AI? They don't know the difference between the letters. They get acronym phobia. And, so this is the thing that's going to take over my jobs. That's the conversation I was having. I'm now having conversations about the actual application, and so I think that's the more it's adopted at home, actually I think is really going to help the overall industry adoption.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, first of all, thanks, Amber. This is just an excellent discussion on the
thank
topic
you.
of VR, AR, and just a broad swath of different industries. What percentage of your business is education?
I would say about 80 to 85% right now.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yeah.
How do you see maybe your company specifically, and maybe in the broader industry, how do you address the disparity between the private schools, the charter schools who have larger budgets, and your low-income public schools who are
You're going
kind
to
of
be
behind?
shocked by this answer.
I'd love to be shocked.
My lower income schools, I have more of them than private schools.
Yeah, that's great.
And I can tell you why. Well, two things. A lot of schools got a lot of money from COVID, and a lot of it had to be used on technology. And so that was helpful to a lot of lower end schools. But the way a lot of grant funding and a lot of budgets work within states is the worse you are, the more money you get. If your test scores are really, really bad, They will pour a lot of money into you to try and do anything to help you get those test scores up. And so a lot of times, failing schools have more money
Wow, that's encouraging.
than not. And I'm working on, we just put in a very large bid for a school that a private foundation had to put $50 million into 2 years ago to keep the doors open. And we just put in a bid to do VR integration through the whole school system. So the whole school system. It's 54 schools. Yeah. And it's one of the worst districts in the state. I mean, a private group had to come in and say to keep your doors open here, you know. So it's and now that's not to take away, obviously, from the private schools, but I will say, because of some of the problems that we've had in public education, there are a lot of private schools, a lot of charter schools. One of the things I see in private schools, yeah, they have money, but they're almost fighting for students, right? And so in some areas, they don't have as much money as you think they do, because they don't have the amount of students that they used to, because they're being pulled to other private schools. Does that make sense? So yes, they do. Those schools actually, a lot of times, will just do a fundraiser at those schools. So instead of getting a grant or anything like that that the public schools can do, we'll do a family day, go out and show the parents what it is, and they'll donate. But a lot of times it won't come from the budget from the actual school for those. This is very different funding mechanisms, oddly enough. But yeah, a lot of the lower schools are benefiting from grant money, federal dollars from COVID, because almost all of it had to be used for technology. And now there's still funds out there. Some of them don't have to be spent till 2023. And they've had 2 rounds of this money. They're on round 3. They're like, what else do I get that fits in this bucket? I'm like, I know. I know what you can do. So I'm trying to get the word out.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Babette Ryan. Actually, I am a teacher. So I'm a STEM educator, and I dabbled into development also. So I feel the pain, because I have a lot of students, 90, 120 students, and what I'm also finding is, they're falling through the cracks, right? And that's one of the reasons why I was like, we got to do AR, we got to do VR, because there's no way to get all of them, Yeah. And what I'm also, another trend that you also mentioned is the trend to community college. They're seeing that maybe 4 years of theory of physics, not really doing stuff, or theory of bio, not doing anything, is not going to get them anywhere. So some of my students, I do encourage them to go into that route with a community college. So my question for you is, what were some of the, you're saying it's kind of up on the precipice. What are the things that are keeping it from there? Is it bureaucracy, or is it just technology, all of it, or politic kind of, or it's just organization? What does it take to get some of that?
So specifically just in the industry as a whole, or K-12, or?
Oh, well, we'll just talk about community college.
Oh, community college?
Workforce development. We're trying to get, I was talking to one of the counselors, right? And maybe some students, or even college students, came back and they got a great job in one of the big banks. And the people at the banks were saying, these kids don't even read the email and don't want to. They don't even want to even read the email to find out what you're.
Half of my team doesn't even open their email.
Yeah, just tell me what you mean. And there's some things, there's that workforce development, definitely, and then there is just being able to do something. They need skills, right? So, I don't know, I'm just wondering, what does it take to get them, like, over there?
Yeah.
And once that is, like, is it, do you see, is it a company, or will it be the technology that gets them there, or is it like Web3 has to get better, or what do you see, like, when?
Might be a shocking answer. Parents,
Oh, yeah.
especially in community college, when you talk about CTE and you talk about that pathway, there is such a there is a feeling among parents that's not a good option.
Yeah.
That's not a good option for their kids. That college is the only way to go, and a 4-year degree, and if you don't do that, it's a failure.
Yeah.
And I say this from talking to community colleges and industry. They are seeing the workforce problem is they're not coming through this system. The biggest challenge is there's two. One, getting their parents to understand the career path that is possible. If I told you that your kid could go and learn a skill for 18 months, come out with no student loan debt, and make $60,000 day one, would you say that's a bad idea? And that in 3 years they would be making over $100,000 if they stayed with it?
Yeah.
That is literally a career path in welding. And I can tell you that I can tell you the company they can go work for right now and go do that, right?
Yeah.
But the parents don't know that career path, and the students don't know the career path, and they're not being shown that. So one thing that we're seeing in Mississippi, they actually just passed a law in this legislative session where the Mississippi Department of Education, the Community College Board, and they have a state workforce group that is funded, it's the state workforce money pot, right? That they have to work in conjunction together. They have to provide career counseling, and they have to start exposing students to careers earlier.
Yeah.
Now, the definition of earlier is at all, sometimes in certain schools, but the hope is that starts in middle school. And so what we are doing is we're working with all three of those organizations on what I was talking about with exposure.
Okay.
Let's expose parents and students not only to the job, and yes, I can train you, but what is that career path? And what are you actually interested in? And what is your aptitude? I can test your aptitude. And I say, you're really good at these 5 things. And because of that, you probably would like these 3 jobs. How about I show you what that looks like?
Yeah.
Right? And that whole flow, you want to talk about changing workforce development.
Yeah.
And because these community colleges, they have some amazing programs.
That's there.
They're already there.
Yeah.
And there's one community college we work with, and they work with Continental Tire. They have a program where these students can start in high school and learn a specific skill and walk in to Continental Tire the day they graduate. They've had 2 students go through this program in 2 years.
Only 2.
2.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's phenomenal. I don't know if you know anything. Continental Tire is a really great place to work. It's phenomenal. Great career path. I've had 2 students go through this. And it's a fantastic program. But we've got to get them there. So can we, I think, and that's what we're doing, is using this technology to help get them there and solve the workforce development problem right now is not the training. It's getting them to the job. That's the workforce development problem right now.
That's where the bridge is. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. But like even K-12 schools, they get monitored, or also they get graded themselves on
Yes.
how many students they put in AP classes. going to four-year schools,
Yep.
not necessarily community college,
Yep.
and not necessarily skills right now, because the kids right now, it's skills right now. What can I do to get money in my pocket now so I could maybe go to college later or what have you? So,
And
yeah, I
that
think-
goes back to the bigger points, right? That is the system
yeah,
that that has to change. And so, this legislative session in Mississippi, I'm seeing, they are working to they're trying to address the problem. It's going to take years, and it's going to take more legislation. It's going to take more policy from the departments of education. It's going to take these changes where, why do parents only want to send their kids to four-year colleges? Well, I mean, and then when we're encouraging that path, and when your career counselors are encouraging that
yes,
path, it's either that or nothing in a lot of kids' minds. And we're not always doing the greatest job of giving them really great options. So I do think that there is a political piece to it, a system, piece to it. So there's multiple things, but I think
it'll eventually get there.
We're close,
yeah.
and that's the cool thing that I do think, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm kind of passionate about this. This technology really can help do something that has not been possible before. If I can, as a parent, if you can put that on and you can see what this career could look like for your kid versus, $150,000 in debt. And listen, I have my MBA. If I wasn't doing this, do you know how many other people were told, go get your MBA, and who you're competing with and what that job market looks like? It ain't easy. And it doesn't always pay off the way that you hope that it would. But if I can put you in a job and you're making 6 digits in less than 5 years, that's pretty good, I think. I'm not doing it, but I think it's really good.
That's great.
Some days I have these conversations, I'm like, what am I doing? I need to go be a welder. They're amazing. They are amazing, amazing opportunities out there and great jobs. And we just need to tell them. And we got a tool that can help really powerful way. So use it.
One more question. I know it's more technical, but from the conversation with other people and the technologists, what do you define as Web 3? What is that? What does that mean exactly? Where? Do you know?
So it's it's the next generation of the web is kind of the what I would say is kind of a simplistic
Would
way
that
of
be
saying
expected for the next generation of AR, VR?
Yes.
Okay.
AR, VR, AI, blockchain.
It has to all be on
It's kind of
internet.
all. It's kind of all integrated into this idea of what the next generation of the web is. A lot of decentralization will be part of that. Big part of what blockchain is bringing, and also a big thing that a lot of people are mad for Zuckerberg trying to own the metaverse.
Yeah.
Because people who are true technologists and truly into VR and this platform and the openness of it, and the community builds it, not
That's
Facebook.
right. That's right.
There is a definite pull between these two different sides of corporate ownership and community ownership in these environments with the new web.
Yeah, you keep talking about the new web.
That's
And
Web
even-
3.
or
It's a whole. It's
Mozilla was big part of it at one time, but
yeah.
So thank you for
Yeah,
answering as
thank
much as
you.
you can. Anyone else? Oh yeah, here.
You mentioned a couple of times about people can feel electrocution just a little bit. Are you talking about that viscerally, or are you integrating things like vests and gloves and
Both.
chairs and that kind of thing?
Both, yeah.
to help them
We
feel
do
it?
haptics. Obviously depends on what hardware you're using as to what you can use for that, but we have haptics and use that. We do have vests that are super powerful. Maybe the Woozer vests, yeah, they're really awesome. They have they're really great in a lot of different ways. But the visceral part as well, I mean, it is more impactful than you could imagine without even having to have the haptics. We have, okay, so we have this one experience. It's a forklift trainer. And it's actually mixed reality because we actually use a real steering wheel and real pedals and all of this. And you go through the OSHA steps or whatever. And so we had we were shooting a video, a marketing video for it. And we wanted to have people on there who'd never done it before, who'd never driven a forklift before, get on this and see if they could learn how to drive a forklift, right? It's a great idea in theory. But it actually is. So, you know, we've got this guy on this forklift, and we're standing back, kind of just chit-chatting. He's going through it. We got cameras on him. All of a sudden, we hear, "Help! Help!" He starts screaming, and he's just sitting in his chair. I'm like, okay. And I go over to him. He goes, "I flipped it." He felt like he flipped the forklift because in his headset, he flipped the forklift, and he was yelling for help. So there were no haptics on that, but he flipped the forklift, and he needed help. So that visceral feeling. Now, what does that mean? He now knows what he did to flip that forklift. Do you think he's going to do that again? Probably not. So, I mean, that is the best example of a true visceral feeling. But yet, the electrocution, have any of y'all done Richie's plank? I mean, I literally cannot take, so if you don't know Richie's plank, you get on an elevator, you go up, the elevator doors open, and you are just, I don't know, stories up in the air, and there is a plank, and you were just supposed to walk this plank. This is also the first VR experience I ever did. I do not recommend it if you've never done VR. I watched somebody do it before me, and I just was making fun of them. I was like, "Why can't you just walk out there?" You know, just giving them a hard time. That door opened. I literally could not step out of the elevator. And I was saying out loud to myself, "Amber, your feet are on the floor." Like, I was saying it to try and convince my mind that you're not up in the air. I have done this experience multiple times. I literally still, to this day, cannot step out onto that plank. I can't do it. And then if you get to the end and you know what happens, then that's another visceral experience. I won't ruin that for those of you who would like to try it. But it is real. You can't turn your mind to tell it what it doesn't want to know. Which is another point just in the conversation. Studies are also showing that the fidelity in VR the increase in fidelity in VR does not increase the realism to your mind, okay? So if you're doing an experience like, you know, a forklift or whatever, it does not have to look photorealistic for your mind to believe what it's doing. And so that's one thing that a lot of people will say, "Oh, you know, it looks cartoonish." Well, you can only have so many polygons in an experience on a non-tethered headset, okay? That's where we are right now. It's not going to look super realistic all the time. Your mind doesn't know. And so these are things that we're starting to see. So if you hear people have the argument about cartoonism, it doesn't actually affect that visceral, realistic feeling that you get, which is, I think, awesome.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we'll get one more question, and we actually have the headsets ready for you to try.
The big reveal.
Awesome. As an intro and a segue to my question, thank you for transposing the word teacher into developer. As an ex-developer who transitioned to just full-time teaching development, I've just been able to call myself a developer, and you've convinced me I can do that again. You know, even if I'm just teaching. So that's pretty cool. And that transitions to my question. You're school-facing as a business, so you provide a lot of technologies to schools, and the schools then use teachers to use those tools. Do you have any teachers on staff, or are you strictly just teacher-facing as a business?
Currently, I'm the only teacher on staff. We are teacher facing. It's very great question because we have just interviewed someone from she's not a teacher, but a curriculum background. So coming from a publishing curriculum, understanding what's needed from a subject matter point of view for that part. I try and give my best knowledge to my team about what teachers face to try and have those conversations with them. And they do a pretty good job of understanding that, but no teachers on staff right now. It has definitely been a conversation quite a bit. I think there's a lot of value for sure. And so hopefully we can grow some more and get some. I think they're a huge resource, not only to our education side of our business, but just to when you talk about learning development and how you build experiences that best translate that to whoever you're teaching. They have a lot of knowledge to give. So hopefully soon.
Thank you. Sounds like you made a good move, getting someone with a history and what to write, because that's what you're writing. You're writing that stuff. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So thank you so much. We still have some food, and so we can go off to simulation. So we have two headsets. One of the headsets is with actually bridge builder simulation. The other one will have some general simulations, right? To try for someone who never tried VR, for example. And yeah, so let's get the event moving. Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you, Amber, so much. В середине процесса я поняла, что это очень неправильно. 15 сейчас время, сколько прошло, и как долго это идет.
Очень интересно. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Are you going to post it somewhere?
Yeah, I think it's available on YouTube
Okay.
already, so Patrick can share the link.
What's going on? Okay. She's directly in that role. She's sharing her struggles. I try to yeah, that's like a lot of people do that. So, does that. It's a way to learn. Yeah, that's right. I'm not going to stay.